What's up, and welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today is part two of our second Steptember call. Like I said last week on Thursday, I was like, we had so many good questions. I don't want to overwhelm you with like a full hour of Q&A. So again, today is another 30-minute, I was going to say call, but replay, 30-minute episode. Part two of our second call, it was nutrition based, right? So the first week we did movement. Second call was a Q&A about all things nutrition, and we had a whole bunch of different topics. And you hopefully already checked out last week, right? Anyway, we will be back again next Thursday with our third and last Steptember call. We'll see. It's likely going to be, again, broken up into two. But either way, I like the bonus episodes anyway, So let's get into it, and then I'll talk to you soon. Margaret says, if you consume too much, in quotes, protein for your body to use at one time, what happens to the extra protein? I've heard conflicting things about it. I don't like to speak in absolutes, but we cannot really eat too much protein. Our body can store fat as body fat. The body can also store carbohydrate as glycogen, which is basically the storage version of carbs in either your liver or in your muscle tissue. So basically, your muscles are like your fuel tank. The more muscle you have, the more carbohydrate, right, sugar we can store. And the brain actually uses sugar as well. We need that. That's our fuel, right? Now, protein doesn't really get stored. Like, we don't have a storage place for protein. Instead, your body is always using protein, breaking it up, breaking it down, right, for muscle, etc. And it's really that balance of like building up proteins and breaking them down that even also plays into like muscle gain and stuff and muscle maintenance. Now, there have been protein overfeeding studies where they fed people up to like, I think it was 4 times their body weight in grams. So I'm speaking like 4 grams per kilo of body weight. So that would be for some people like 350, 400, grams of protein, which is crazy, by the way. And I'm not saying like no one on this call needs to be eating that much protein, by no means, right? But just to show you, these were protein overfeeding studies where these people were in a calorie surplus and they did not gain body fat, even, which is crazy. Like, it's kind of weird to think about it, but they did not gain body fat. They just got very hot. That was like one common like feedback of the participants. Like they got super warm. Well, what happens, right? Food is thermogenic, meaning like we burn calories, right? We talked about the thermic effect. Protein, 20 to 30% gets burned off already through digestion. Likely has to do with that, right? People got very hot because they're eating so much protein, they have to kind of like burn it off. Or at least the digestion is burning the extra calories, right? Now, not all of it. It's not that you're burning all of that. I'm just speaking of kind of like the digestive process. Where does your protein kind of like, like what does it do? It kind of just hangs around, for lack of a better term. Like it gets broken down into amino acids, and then your body's just going to use it. This even plays into the age-old myth of you cannot eat more than 30 grams of protein per meal. Like, no, you can, absolutely. Because there's these claims that you cannot digest it, but you can absolutely do that. So you can have 60, 80, 100 grams of protein in one meal, and you're going to break it down. You're going to digest that and absorb it. However, I will say this, if we're looking at what's optimal from a muscle protein synthesis, aka like muscle building, right, standpoint, it's probably best to just have your protein spread evenly across the day. So if your protein target is 160 grams and you have 4 meals, it's 4 meals, 40 grams of protein. Oh, there you go. But yeah, we don't have to worry about having too much. And I also know Margaret's macros currently, and you're not having too much. So it's okay. So, and if anything, last point here, I always tell people like, if you overshoot any macro, like let it be protein. Like that's the one that really doesn't hurt, Next question. So Tony says, when working to build muscle, what's the optimal window of time after working out to consume your post-workout protein? Really good question. Love that you brought this up. And he said also, and does the type of protein matter? To your last point of the question, no, not really. Doesn't really matter. have whatever you like. What I will say though, it's likely nice to have a meal after your workout that's a little bit easier to digest. I always tell people like, hey, the 80-20, the 20%, like post-workout is a really good window for that. Type of protein doesn't matter. What you could do if you want to get nitpicky, you could keep fiber and fats low because it's going to slow down digestion, and we actually want to absorb that stuff. So we want to have protein and carbohydrate is your main, like your priority there. And the optimal window also comes from a myth, right? Where you had the anabolic window where you have to eat right away or get a shake like right away after your workout. You're good. Anywhere within 2 hours, you're fine. Even like up to 3, slightly less optimal. But I mean, to be honest with you, as long as you eat at some point, you're good. But let's say 2 hours. Like within 2 hours, if you want to, optimize stuff, there you go. Prioritize carbs and protein. A little bit lower fat and lower carbs. Lower fat and lower fiber, higher carbs, like I said, because fiber and fat slow down digestion. Hilda says, I like intermittent fasting. Can it be combined with building more muscle? It's not great. Intermittent fasting, it's a big it depends one. It can be a tool when people are dealing with specific conditions, the digestive issues. It's okay. It's not bad. And there's definitely time and place for it. However, if we think, right, does it make sense to be fasting if we want to build muscle? Like, actually, no. My question is always to people like, hey, why do we want to fast? Since you're a female, here's the thing. Intermittent fasting actually can be a very, very big stressor to the body. Even more so for women. This is not me generalizing, whatever, like that's actual research to point that out, right? But generally speaking, it's not a great idea for a lot of people, a lot of people. Now, for muscle gain, well, if we think, okay, what's anabolic, right? What's basically supports, building up tissue, building muscle, that will be eating, right? We're giving the body the fuel, the raw materials that it needs to actually build the muscle. Fasting is a little bit more catabolic, where it's more related to kind of like breaking it down, right? So logically speaking, like actually, no, it doesn't add up. Is it bad per se? No, but I would love to continue the conversation as to why we are currently intermittent fasting, because I've seen with most people who are doing it on their own and it's not supervised and it's not done for the right reasons, it usually backfires and it just kind of makes things worse than anything. But again, there's a lot of questions to this, so we will follow up about this because there's no general answer there. Generally speaking, though, intermittent fasting is not great for muscle gain. Not saying that you can't combine it, though. Just want to have some more context. Guru says, what do you think of one vegetarian diet a week? Health benefits? No. It's cool. It's great. Have some variety. It's not healthier in any way. Right? That's the marketing shit these days. This is coming, by the way, guys. Like, this is coming from someone who was plant-based for a very long time, right? Me. So, thing is with those camps, right? With those camps, it's very, or any diet camp for that matter, it's very, very biased. And they literally, they cherry pick whatever research they can find that might support their right point of view. We see this in documentaries, we see this in so many things, and it's legit like lying about shit to convince people, right? Like, I'm not against it by any means. I think it's a great thing to do, and I think what matters most is why people do it. If people do it for the environment, well, let's not get into this discussion. Like, that's also actually bullshit, but okay. That's fair. Okay, if that's your reasoning, great, go for it. If your reasoning is for the animals, great, awesome, totally great, nothing wrong with that. I fully support you. And I know that she's not a vegetarian, but just speaking generally here, right? I've had many vegetarian and vegan clients, and we get still great results. It's just a conversation that we need to have. Is it objectively healthier? No, it is not. I also know some vegans who have the worst ever diet possible because, hey, Coca-Cola and Oreos are also vegan, right? I know a lot of those. Here's the thing, guys. It's not healthier per se. This kind of goes back to certain diet camps, really kind of like pushing their diet and then kind of like getting on the high horse and like acting like their diet's superior, right? It's the same with the keto shit. It's the same with the fucking carnivore stuff. It's like all of those extreme camps is with, hey, intermittent fasting. There's a lot of people there also in that crowd, right? That say that it's like the next best thing. It's not really any benefits for muscle gain or fat loss there either, right? And this is, guys, like with anything nutrition, the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. Not even the middle, like it's probably like that 80-20, right? But let's think about this. Okay, can we look at different diets and take different things from it? And guess what? Because we can look at like one study here, one study there. But if we look at everything, all of the research is very clear that a diet that includes meat and fish and fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and those kind of things is likely best, and then mostly minimally processed, right? It doesn't have to be on either end of the extreme. Is there a time and place for certain, diets as tools? Yes. Keto, for example, was created for patients with seizures, for example, in I think the 80s or 70s. But I see that Danny actually raised his hand. So let me, what's up, Danny? I'll unmute you first. One sec. Are you unmuted? There he
Yeah,
is.
now I'm unmuted. On this thing you're just saying about the vegetarian diet or the carnivorous diet, whatever. Which proteins are actually better taken in by the body compared to each other? Do you know what I mean?
Dairy is number one. So I think whey is number one. Then it's eggs, and then meat and fish, I think, very close, like behind that. So those would be the, like, objectively speaking, if we look at the amino acid profile, the digestion and absorption rates, basically, those would be the best ones. So dairy, eggs, meat, and fish. Yeah, and then
So
plants just
going
less.
on to that, so actually egg white proteins from well, animals are better taken in by the body than plant-based proteins.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, dude. So that's the thing. That's just kind of like, that's objectively how the body works. And this is removed from any, like bias or opinions, whatever. We just need to understand, hey, how does the body work? How can we like include different foods, and then we can still be totally fine. I forgot what it's called. There's like a certain scale where basically eggs are like 100, and then I think it's kind of like a protein quality scale, basically. And then they had egg whites as 100 or eggs, and then dairy actually ended up to be even better. And then the rest is behind that. I'll look that up if I can see. I can find that, and then I'll post it in the group. But that's a great point. So next question, I'll try to run down this list because we still have a bunch. I'll do my best to finish this in 10 minutes. So long story short, Guru, go for it. Totally great to have a vegetarian, day once a week. Totally fine. It's not healthier per se, though. Annalisa says, if you should rate carbs, fats, and protein, and which is the most and least important to reach in one day, how would this look like and why? Protein, number one. Protein is involved in uncountable processes in the body. It's what builds us. It's what is going to help you build a muscle, maintain your muscle. It keeps you full, which is just kind of like a bonus, right? But protein is the number one. That's the number one by far, far more important than the rest. It's essential, meaning that we need it to survive. For that reason, I'm gonna put fats at number two, because fats are essential. However, the amount of fats that you need, right, for it to be like essential, like to survive, basically, is really fucking simple. It's like for smaller females, maybe like 40 grams. For most men, at least 50 to 60, maybe. Sometimes we can go a little bit lower, really kind of depending on where we're at in the fat loss phase. But generally speaking, fat's a second, and that's going to be your secondary fuel source. It's going to cover your hormones. It's super important. Cholesterol, for example, is the building block for your sex hormones or your steroid hormones. What was the next one? Carbohydrate, or let me see. So fats are also important for nervous system and more. So that's a big one for health. And then we have carbohydrate. It's your primary fuel source. However, here's the thing: it is not essential, and this is like a big, right, reason, right? The keto crowd is like, you don't need carbs. Like, the fact that we can survive without carbohydrate doesn't mean it's not important. It means that our body is really fucking good at surviving, and it can switch onto a backup system, which is ketones. Now, also overhyped, but anyway, so it would be protein, it would be fats, and then carbs. However, for most people, most of my clients, I'm always going to say in their case, carbs as second, because we typically go with a higher carb approach, better performance, better muscle gain, better results in the fat loss phase, generally speaking. And that's not for fat loss, but it's for the muscle maintenance and the fact that we can include more filling foods. Really good question, by the way. And the fat carb ratio is going to depend on how active someone is. So for example, Annalisa, she's very, very active, a lot of steps, a lot of workouts. Okay, carbs are going to be super key for her. Someone who doesn't really work out as much might just be totally great with almost like a moderate, carb to fat ratio, where it's almost identical in terms of like the amount of calories. So also they're personalized, right? Danny says, after some heavy cardio exercises like running, my body seems to scream for extra intake of whatever food I can get my hands on. Since I've had a gastric bypass back in 2019, I can't take in too much food in one setting, which is a good thing. But still, especially in the evening, it's hard to deal with it. Do I listen to my body and give it the extra nutrients it asks for, or do I ignore it? That's a hard one to say. I don't have any experience with clients with a gastric bypass, full transparency. What I'm thinking here will be making sure that before you go on that run, you want to have a good amount of fuel in, first of all, before anything, right? I think that would be a big one. I think if you can, also remembering that your stomach is smaller, I would think, okay, it's a big run, right? You're right. Sometimes after cardio, right, we do get extra hungry. It's almost like the body wants to be like, let's overcompensate almost. It's obviously a sign that it needs, right, energy. It's hard to say if I don't necessarily know what the rest of the day looks like if we have like a food log that we can look at or those kind of things. With these kind of things, I'm always like, I'm curious what the rest of the day looks like. Seeing if we can have a good pre-workout meal, maybe like 2 hours before the actual run, maybe have a little extra fuel, like almost like right before, maybe 30 minutes, something very light. And then even during, you could have something like those, the sports drinks or something like that, to almost like avoid that from happening, not completely, but getting the extra fuel. And then I do think if it's a long run, like it's good to still get a good amount in. It's going to be more difficult. So maybe having something that's a little bit more less fit or a little bit less filling, maybe. Again, it's a tricky one. I do think that it's going to be a good idea to, after a long run, like make sure that you get enough calories in. And if anything, maybe that's a good tip. I would mostly then look at the calories and try to figure that out, making sure that we get enough in there. But we can talk more about this if you want to follow up. Island says, is it true that low processed foods can be better for your gut health? So, minimally processed foods, I guess. Right now, I eat so much light, low-fat, zero, food products. I'm starting to think this can be the cause of my bloating. I want to eat minimally processed foods, but I also want to keep my calories low. So I'm a bit confused. I'm actually confused by this question too, because minimally processed foods are typically lower in calories. Maybe so the zero food products, right? If that means that it's a lot of artificial sweeteners, I have seen a lot of artificial sweeteners cause digestive issues with people. I don't think it's going to be the lower fat options per se. So here's my checklist for you for bloating. Always start with fiber and hydration. Those are the biggest ones. Start there. Are you getting just about 14 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories that you're taking in consistently, right? Start there. And then hydration, do you drink? I mean, basically when you're thirsty, but for you, it's likely going to be 2 liters a day, maybe, right? Start there. Next step, sleep and stress. 2 really big ones that can cause bloat as well. And then maybe even things like hormonal birth control or other medications. Like, generally speaking, if you want to keep your calories lower and you're having minimally processed foods, that should improve it. However, if fiber is maybe too low or too high, it could cause issues. If we're not drinking enough water, if we are very stressed, it could be a big one. If sleep is not in a great spot, so I would start there. And if you have further questions, feel free to DM me, of course. You've been a client as well, right? So I'm happy to help. Kim says, my question is regarding fiber. I'm having a hard time reaching that goal. Would supplements help, or should I just try harder and reach my goal through food? So yeah, Kim, we just started basically 2 weeks ago with Kim. And what I will say is, let's continue to try first. I actually never have anyone take a fiber supplement. The guidelines I gave earlier, the 1 to 3 servings of fruit, 2 to 4 for your veggies, minimally processed foods, right? Whole grains, whole grain products, those type of things. Maybe having something like raspberries is very high in fiber, chia seeds, flax seeds, super high in fiber. Having those foods and looking at real food first is always going to be best. That is it for fiber. Like, we're going to be working on this, but start there. Nick says, as for my weekly question, basically moved all my intake of water to bottled sparkling water, 1.5 to 3 liters a day. Does the carbon dioxide in the bottles have any effect, either good or bad, on the body, or is it just the same as regular water? Mostly the same. However, carbonated drinks can actually help you in a fat loss phase because it's almost a little bit more filling. So I do like that. And yeah, it's totally great. If you like that, awesome, go for it. I've seen that really work well for people in a fat loss phase. And that being said, maybe unrelated, but diet sodas, guys, great tool to have something sweet in your cut. It's totally great, right? The carbonation is actually something that's going to fill you up more. All right, Marla says, so I have developed a serious love for our air fryer. Yes, 100%. I'm with you there. However, I find it hard to eat the homemade French fries without ketchup. Do you have any better options to accompany those precious potato sticks? Have to fucking ketchup. That's my answer. Maybe it depends on how much. What you could do, by the way, because we have one here that's like a lower sugar option. There's one that has like, let me say this right. I think there's one that's like a natural whatever, like, which is really boring. It kind of sucks. And then there's one which has no sugar. Maybe it's like artificial sweetened. I don't know, but like there is kind of like a lower calorie version. It's actually really good. So if you're looking for something like that, honestly, I would go with that one. But hey, like, I would just have to catch up. Like, it's fine. You know what I mean? It's actually cool. Here's the thing too, because you're using the air fryer, you're already like saving, you're not spending a lot of kind of like calories, right, on fats and those kind of things. So you're already having like a better option there, which I love. And if you like ketchup, to be honest with you, like, have some, right? 80-20, like, it's not like we have a liter of ketchup, or at least I hope so, you know. But like that's something you can actually include and be totally fine. Carrie says, all right, odd nutrition question, and we're getting there. So we have a few more guys, and then we're good. All right, odd nutrition question, but I know you just went through this. COVID is on the rise again. Yeah, I was down for like 2.5 weeks. Right, fever, like my throat is still a little bit of a mess, but when down and out, what did you do or recommend for your nutrition intake? Did you stay moving or rest? I kept moving by walking, just low intensity stuff. That's a given. I want to keep moving. By the way, I'm also someone who, when I'm sick, like other than maybe one day a year, like I tend to not care and I'll just move on. But I'll still go on my walks. And here's one thing that I did, because at that moment I was in a mini cut. I was in a fat loss phase, which was supposed to be 6 weeks. I stopped after 3 weeks. I got sick, and right away I went out of the calorie deficit to maintenance. Boom, 600 calories extra. My weight, by the way, guys, was the exact same on average, right? So you're fine, but we need to make sure that we get enough energy, because the immune system is already being taxed, right? So we need to get enough calories in. We need to get our macronutrients in, our micronutrients, lots of water, right? Rest, but like hydrate, rest, and sleep well. And that's really what you want to do. It's very common for people, and this is a chat I have. I mean, recently it's been weekly, but it's very easy for us to be like, oh, I'm sick, right? I don't have appetite, those kind of things. Okay, well, what happens? People tend to either just eat crappy food, or barely at all. But think about it, like your body's already struggling. Give it like the stuff that it needs, you know what I mean? So I would double down on nutritious foods, healthy foods. And if you don't have that much of an appetite, at least eat good, like healthy, minimally processed foods for the most part. When you do, drink lots of water, rest. Linda says, how does stress impact our dietary habits, and what are some nutrient-rich foods that can help mitigate the effects of stress on our bodies? Really good question. So first of all, how does stress impact our dietary habits? It depends. Some people get, cravings, and they eat their feelings away. So a lot of people tend to overeat when they're stressed, and then there's a lot of people who tend to undereat and skip eating altogether. So it depends. It's a very personal one. So it could go either way. Stress does really impact digestion, though. That's a big one. So if we're continuously stressed, that's going to play into impact there. It's not going to be great. Then what are some nutrient-rich foods that can help? I mean, generally speaking, eating that mostly minimally processed diet, right, will lower inflammation. Like that's one way. Is not necessarily directly related to stress, but that's a big one. And here's the thing. Another reason why I like to push for the mid to higher carbohydrate diet. When you eat carbohydrate, you spike insulin, which is always like this demonized thing, but it's normal. It's a normal response. Like if you're not diabetic, like you're good. Now, because insulin basically blunts cortisol, it's almost like an off switch, like a valve, right? It's like an off switch for cortisol, which is that stress hormone. So it can actually help you manage stress in a way. It's not going to do like it all for you. Like you still want to like actively, right, manage stress, those kind of things. But when you eat carbohydrate, you can spike insulin, which can drop cortisol. That is maybe one tool in the toolkit. Turet says, how does age affect a good diet and exercise? It's becoming, with the years, it becomes more important to stay active. Muscle building gets more difficult. The body is going to need more protein to do the same amount of work. So eating enough protein, moving, getting to the gym, lifting weights, and building muscle, those are the biggest long-term investments we can make for our own health, which, right, like I said, like it becomes more difficult, but also more important. You always hear, hey, it's right, it's our age that slows the metabolism, but that's not the case. Between the ages of 20 to 60, it actually remains stable when corrected for fat mass, lean mass, etc. What it is people stop moving, people stop lifting weights, so they're losing, muscle, and they also don't eat enough protein. So long story short, we're going to eat a high protein diet, and it becomes more important with the years. We're going to keep lifting weights because building muscle is super important for our health. Plus, it becomes more difficult to build and maintain. So we're going to really have to make those investments in ourselves. Then we have to keep moving. Last two questions, guys. Thanks for sticking with me for so long. Sabrina says, with not so much time to eat, is it okay to make a smoothie out of the usual breakfast and have it on the road? Yes, absolutely. She says, is there a difference between fruit, oats, etc., as it is or in liquid form? The only change there is that you've basically pre-processed the food kind of like before going into your stomach. So if anything, it's maybe gonna be a little bit less filling, but no, I think that's a very, very good option. And then our last question for today, last but not least, Iban says, when struggling with sleep and night shifts, is there any food you will recommend not eating besides the obvious sugar, caffeine? I'm thinking long term. We did a full podcast, actually 2 episodes related to shift work, caffeine, those kind of things. One was a little bit more like a testosterone deep dive, but like both are related. When you do night shifts, is like having, Danny's not gonna like this one, but like working night shifts, it is one of the biggest forms of stress, right, we can actually put on our bodies. It's like having that disrupted circadian rhythm. It's a big one. It's not good for us. However, here's the thing. There's people who need to do important work, like Danny, for example, who's currently at his work. Like, people need to do these jobs, obviously, right? So we're not going to be like, well, just quit your job. Like, no, that's bullshit. What we need to do when you have shift work is we need to put extra emphasis on those healthy foods, on our rest. Maybe we want to include naps. We want to do whatever it takes to at least optimize and play the cards that were dealt, if that makes sense. Is there any foods that I would not recommend eating? No, but there are foods that I would recommend eating, and that's your whole foods. Just have a healthy meal, something that's going to keep you full, that includes your protein, carb, fat, and then color. Caffeine, hey, like, it's cool to have. Like, you probably need it, right? Just don't overdo it, but like have it. But don't go for like the quick options. Like, make that extra effort of really getting those quality foods in, because the night shift by itself is already messing with your health. So let's at least look at all the other things that we can do to optimize it, right? That was our last question for today. Now, a few people left us in the meantime, which is totally cool. Like I said, we definitely went over, but no worries. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Danny, Amarla, Amonia, for sticking around. Have a great evening. Thanks for hearing me ramble for more than an hour. But I will talk to you guys very soon. Have a great rest of your week, and then we will catch up again next week.